Hey there. I want to talk today about having a good work ethic. You know, when we look at our job and our everyday work life, it's easy to think another day, another dollar. It's just a job. There's no greater purpose other than paying the bills. It's certainly, if you're a Christian, compared to doing ministry or church work, it's not the same. Or it's easy to think that. You know, in our job, our responsibilities, the conversations we have at work, even the things that are unseen, that nobody sees, they can have a greater purpose. Because God sees it all and He wants to work in all those areas. And to back up what I'm saying today, I want to look at a verse in the book of Colossians in the New Testament that Paul wrote to the people in the church there. And this is what it says in Colossians 3:23 and 24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as if working for the Lord, not for human masters. It is the Lord Jesus that you are serving. Now, this passage is talking to two slaves about how they would deal with their masters. Now, in Australia, we don't really have that situation at the moment, but we either work for somebody or we have a client to work for. So there is some level of, accountability or submission to a human being in our work. But what Paul's saying here, that is a greater purpose that speaks straight into our everyday work and life. The key idea that I'm trying to get across here today is, think about, all right, you're working for an earthly person in some way, but there's also a greater purpose that we are working for, and that is God. And when we embrace that, there's an opportunity that can really change the way we see our work. Firstly, because when we work and we're just thinking about our boss at work, there's a tendency to work harder when they're watching. We want to be noticed, we want approval, we certainly want to keep our job secure, but we might even want a reward or a promotion at some point. And when Paul wrote this verse, he was flipping that thinking. What he was saying was the real audience is God Himself. So that means, when no one sees your effort, God sees it. When you feel what you're doing's small and it's not going to be noticed, it still matters. When people don't appreciate you, your reward will come. The reward was never going to come from them anyway. It'll come from God Himself. There's always going to be times where you feel frustrated, seasons where you feel frustrated and what you're doing doesn't have any meaning. You might even be in a situation right now where your job's rather repetitive. You might even feel overlooked. There might be somebody that you've been trying to, pour into them and mentor them, and they're not giving you anything back. But when we take in what this verse is saying, our work has eternal value when it's done for Jesus. Now, that's not to say that we become, when it says work with all your heart, it doesn't mean become a perfectionist, because that's only going to burn you'll burn out doing that. But when we do with a genuine heart, we do it with sincerity, integrity, and purpose, and we show up all the time, not just going through the motions, there'll be an eternal reward, and the benefit to other people it will be part of God's purposes. You know, you might be on a job site, you might be in an office. This goes for even when you're at home with your family or at church on the weekend. There's an opportunity to change the perspective of how we see our work. And that shift is to, first of all, see our work has a greater purpose, but it's also an act of worship to the God we believe in. To put it this way, like, can you imagine you're a tradesman on a building site, and that tradesman starts to cut corners and nobody notices. But if he was to work for Jesus himself, he would realise that he sees everything, and then if he changes his perspective, then the standard of his work is going to increase. Not out of fear, but out of honour to God. So that mindset in this is what Paul in these verses, that is what he is calling us to do. And there is a promise that we will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward when we get to heaven, because he sees what other people miss, and he rewards us when we do that because we've been faithful. Now, for us today, whatever is in front of you, whether that's big or small, what this verse is saying is do it for him. Not for applause, not for results, not for recognition, but because you serve the God that you believe in. That makes ordinary work meaningful because it's part of a bigger picture. If you think about the next week, what meaningful aspect of your work, big or small, is going to play a part in a bigger picture that God has, not only for you, but for the people you work with? I really want you to think today about the possibilities when we put this sort of mindset into practice and we follow God and we follow his guidance. There is so much opportunity in our work. Quite often, it's a workmate that people might hear about God. And working as if we're working for God is a great witness in itself. I really challenge you to put that into practice and live a life where we're called to do what God has positioned us to do. You have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.